Hello. Oh, you're muted, Kyra. Come on.
Naturally. Hello, beautiful people. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to a special bonus installment in our discussions pertaining to the Kindle Vella Bootcamp. But more importantly, we have a special afternoon discussion with the legendary Lindsay Powers.
Yes, we're very much looking forward to talking to Lindsay today about a number of things, mostly kind of all things publishing. Lindsay is an author. She works with Amazon Books, and she will have the opportunity to introduce
Things publishing.
great things. But we're very excited to have her here today and just share some stories and have some chats. And as always, with any of our guest speakers, you are welcome to ask questions live in the comments. So drop them as they come, and we will pull them on screen later in the end of towards the end of our prepared questions for Lindsay. But without further ado, let's bring her on.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the nice intro. Just making sure you can hear me fine, right?
Affirmative.
Great. So as Kyra and Mackenzie were so kind to introduce me, I'm an author. I've written this book, You Can't F Up Your Kids, which is narrative nonfiction. It's based off a program that my team and I created when I was the editor-in-chief of Yahoo Parenting, and it was called No Shame Parenting. It ended up going crazy viral, reached over 170 million people across social media, led to partnerships with the Obama White House, and it was this great opportunity to talk about the judgment that parents face. I also wrote, an essay for a book called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids, which came out last November. And I've been a writer for a long time with bylines, the New York Times, the Washington Post, New York Magazine, New York Post, and have done a lot of partnerships with TV shows like Good Morning America and The Today Show and so on and so forth. But right now, my primary job is as a senior editor on the Amazon Book Review, where I curate a monthly nonfiction list, the best nonfiction of the month, and I do a lot of kind of cultural coverage as well. So, I might do a roundup of books to celebrate the 20th anniversary of The Wire, or a roundup of like juicy royal wedding books to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee, her 70 years on the throne. And along with my team on the Amazon Book Review, we read thousands of books a year to recommend the best ones.
Thank you so much.
Where was that job at the career fair?
It feels like a unicorn job to me, I'm saying. So I enjoy it.
That's so cool. Well, in that vein, I guess our first question for you would be, especially with your comprehensive career and multifaceted career as a writer, why publishing? Like, what brought you to that place in your
career? That's a great question. So I grew up just loving books. I had kind of this non-traditional background, kind of this like sad, traumatic childhood. And I found myself escaping my old non-air conditioned house to the air conditioning of the library at a pretty young age, where I found this like wonderful escape in reading. And from a really young age, I was writing a lot. I was the editor of the middle school newspaper. I grew up just outside of Chicago, and I like opened the newspaper once and I saw there was a kids section, and I was like, why aren't I writing for the kids section? So I started pitching. I think I had to write a letter and put it in the mail. I'm probably aging myself. So I started pursuing it at a really young age, and I have always been interested in writing, especially nonfiction and journalism, because it's really satisfying to talk to people and interview people and kind of like put your life in a story and put what's really happening in like a nice, not always neat story, but to find a narrative.
Yes, definitely. Apologies for the awkward pause there. I'm just taking it all in, because my next kind of question is like all of that, which I love the picture that you painted. All of that is also to say, like, what led you to Amazon Books? What led you to where you are in your current job?
So have always been so grateful to have accessibility to books, and I think Amazon does it really well in today's day and age. And I think, there's room for all different kinds of places where you can buy and read books. Like you are just as likely to see me at my favorite local bookstore as you are buying books on Amazon. And I think um, it really it's kind of this. It's like the original bookseller. I mean, that's what I mean. Amazon now you can buy anything, but it started as a book seller outlet. And so I've always loved it, and I always thought it was just did a really good job kind of making books really accessible to the widest population possible. Um, but from like a tactical point of view, how I ended up at Amazon Books, when I was promoting my book, and as you all know, because I know everyone that's on this call are working on their books, part of your publishing process is trying to land as much PR placement as possible. And I always think that, right? Like you can write a great story, but it's also like if a forest falls in a tree, or if a tree falls in a forest, rather, does it count? So so I was just like trying to promote my book everywhere, and really hustling. And I was like, surely there's somewhere on Amazon where I can promote my book. And Googling around, I found the Amazon Book Review, which is, I look at it as a more accessible New York Times book review. It's like all the best books. The goal is to connect customers to their next great read. So I mined my own network. I found where I was able, I found a mutual friend with Sarah Gelman, who's the editorial director. She introduced us. Sarah and I hit it off, and Sarah ended up interviewing me a couple of times for my book. And so that's how we met. And then my book came out in March 2020, which is like the best time to release your art into the world because like the world shut down. It was COVID. It was crazy. So Sarah and I connected. We had a couple of great interviews. I went off to promote my book, to write. I like launched my own content consulting company. I was homeschooling my children in the background, like crazy 2020 life. Um, and then, 20 I don't know, all the years fade together. But as we were all vaccinated, I started to say, what's next? I want to like go back and have a real job now. And so I was like looking around and I was like, let's see if there's a job at Amazon in this like amazing Amazon book review. Can I get it? Will somebody pay me to read books? Sure enough, it was like a sign from the universe. They had just posted a senior editor role. So I reached out to Sarah, and that doesn't mean I didn't have to do 9 interviews, a writing test, and like go through the entirely crazy process. But I like to think maybe she at least opened my resume knowing that we had worked together a little bit in the past.
I actually have like a quick additional follow-up question pertaining to that. More so like how a part of the reason why you are where you are is through leveraging your network. So do you think that authors like leverage can be intentional about leveraging their networks? Like should they think about that proactively? Or do
Yes.
they kind of like, yeah, should they like take advantage of like relationships as they come along? Like how can an author be intentional about that?
That's a great question. I think all of the above. I think, I am so grateful to mentors and people who I've met over the course of my career, and I'm always paying it forward as much as I can. And I think that authors need to always be thinking about this and don't think, you know, you never know who you're going to meet in the world who's going to help open a door for you. I mean, whether it's doing an interview for a job or for a book that leads to your next role, or like I used to work in the mall in high school, and I started chatting up a customer, and I come to find out that she was the Midwestern correspondent for Billboard magazine. I was a high schooler, and I talked my way into an internship in my like high school job. So I think that's also like a good thing with writing and journalism is it just teaches you to like just really engage with people in the world. And the more people we engage with in the world, just the better stories we have to share, the more connected we are. So I've always kept a spreadsheet of like everyone I meet ever professionally. And I just try to check in with folks. And what I find to be hard about that is as a journalist and as a woman, I like don't like being self-promotional. Like that makes me very uncomfortable, right? Like I want to scoop somebody else's story, and as a woman I feel like we're socialized to not like toot our own horns. Um so that's challenging. So I think you have to do it in a way that doesn't feel icky, right? Like you're not like you're checking in, you're helping people when you can, you're paying it forward. It's a relationship, you know. There's these old boy clubs all over the place, and I think like we need to, as writers, kind of create those networks to help each other out and always be open to meeting new folks and expanding our networks.
That's so helpful. It
Thank
requires
you.
a caliber of like vulnerability, but it does seem to be worthwhile.
Yeah. I mean, look, you're not put on this earth for everyone to love you. Not everyone's going to reply to you. Not everyone's going to help, and that's fine. And you can't help everyone either, but I think, you do the best you can and you put yourself out there and you hope it pays off in some way.
So you're in the publishing industry, you found the unicorn job, and you're an author. So how does all of that fit together? How has being an author influenced your understanding of the publishing industry? Because I know for us, for Kyra and myself, we were both authors first before we entered into the publishing industry, and
Right.
it's a different perspective.
It's a different world. It is really different than kind of like the writing industry and the journalism industry. Um, so it's been really helpful. I kind of feel like I've looked at the publishing industry from two different sides now. Because as a writer, I interface mostly with my editor, and then, well, there's different stages of your book. I interfaced mostly the hustle to get my agent, and then like mostly with my agent while I was working on the pitch, and then after it was sold, then it was mostly with my editor. Whereas now I'm really working with like all different sides of the publishing industry. I feel like the sales reps and more of the publicity team, and the marketing team, even though those people were kind of dipping in and out of my own book. Um, so I think that being an author gives me like it helps me kind of see the whole industry, but also it gives me a lot of sympathy for writers and empathy, if you will, for writers. Like on Amazon, we don't write a lot of negative reviews in the sense that if we don't like a book, we just don't write about it. Because the goal is to connect customers to their next great read. I personally love that because even if I'm reading a book and I'm like, you know what, this book's not resonating with me, I respect the work and the process and the hustle that went into like bringing that book to life. Like I think it just gives me like great empathy for my day to day with my job where books are just like flying at me from all angles and I have to kind of decide which ones to cover and which ones not to cover.
Yeah, as an author, I would tend to agree, but then as an editorial or journalist, you know, how how do you combat the like, well, bad press is still press? Like, what do sometimes these bad reviews, like, we hated this book, but it then sells millions of copies because all of these people are
Right.
like, well, I want to find out if I also hate the book.
I mean, I also see that because I remember one review where my book was like skewered and I was like, who does this person think she is? Um, but right, I thought maybe it would introduce my book to a different population. So I think there's probably no right or wrong way to get press, and it's like the hustle to get as much press as you can because our attention is everyone's attention is splintered into a million different ways, um, and you want to break through.
Yeah. It's, I mean, the notion or like having buzz or discourse around your book at large is good, but to your point, like especially and from the perspective of the actual reviewer, like don't you want to be responsible for circulating positivity in the world and not negativity? Like, mm, it's a delicate dance. And you do an excellent job of portraying that.
Thanks. It really is delicate, and I just it's like right, you don't wanna, like, beat people down who wrote a book because there's an audience for every book that's for most books that are out there, um, and luckily, there are so many different platforms on which to promote your book, right? Like, when
Right.
I was promoting my book, it was Instagram, because that was 2020, ye old 2020. Now we're in 2022, and it's like book talk galore. So, it's amazing how fast, um, things change, um but I also think, and like when it comes to promoting your book, it's also like finding the right platform and then like framing it for the right platform as well, and finding a way to like make it really resonate on that platform. Whether it's like individual pitches or story ideas or, your social media strategy. It's like you're writing a book and you're marketing your book at the same time.
Absolutely. And it's funny because you kind of were using like the language of journalism in parameterizing actions that authors take once they've
Yeah.
developed their book. So I guess our next question would be, how was your experience being a byline writer and a journalist at large different from writing a book? Were
Yeah.
some skills transferable?
Definitely some were transferable and some were big learning curve for me. The big learning curve I would say would be inserting myself in the story. I really like resisted it at first, but then I was like, what do I like to read? Like, how do I feel connected to a book? It's the narrative. So, a good friend of mine is Susanna Cahalan, and she wrote Brain on Fire, which sold like 100 bajillion million copies. We worked together as cub reporters at the New York Post a long time ago, and she kind of like sat down and explained to me how there's several different narrative arcs that you want to carry through the whole book, and one of them needs to be your own. So that was helpful to just hear that, and have that visual. So putting myself into it also just, I mean, like when I would write articles, it would be like 700 words. Well, my book was 93,000 something words, and that's a lot of words. That was a jump. Um, so that I think if you like to leap from the journalism part to the now I have a year to write 93,000 words, like, the deadlines felt so different. I mean, I worked on these crazy deadlines where I was editing 10 stories a day or writing 2 or 3 or 10 stories a day. Um, so a couple of things that I did to try to wrap my head around, like, the difference between being a byline writer and, like, writing a whole book is I read Stephen King's On Writing, which to me is just, like, this wonderful example of, um how to kind of what his process is, and even though I'm not, like, a big horror writer, I mean, he's a legend, but, um, I like this book really resonated with me, so even if you're not a Stephen King fan, I, like, highly recommend, and he writes 2,000 words a day, and I said, "You know what? I can write 2,000 words a day." So I broke it down into small bits, which I found to be incredibly helpful. Also, the thing about journalism that, like, really prepped me for book writing is that I dealt with so many deadlines that I'm not one of those people that needs to, like, go sit in a cabin by a lake to find writing inspiration. Like, I have a deadline. I sit down and crank. Like, I look at writing almost as a trade. The more you do, the better you are, and you just gotta get it done. Even if it's not great, you can go back and edit it later. So, I didn't spend a lot of time waiting for inspiration to strike. I was very methodical about it because I had spent 15 years writing under crazy deadlines or however many years at that point. So it served me well. I and again, there's like no wrong process, right? I have writer friends who do that. They rent a lake house and they like shut off the world and don't talk to people for 8 months, which I think is awesome. But I also think that can be unattainable for a lot of people. Like I had childcare till 5 p.m. every day, so like I couldn't go live at a lake house and write a this kind of a thing. So basically, it just helped me keep it like very practical with my day to day.
So, and I want to remind the audience, so as we kind of reach towards the end of our prepared questions, feel free to drop your questions for Lindsay in the chat here and we'll pull them on during Q&A. But, so with all of this writing that you've done, which is a lot, including the book, which we know is no small feat, how do you frame rejection as a writer?
Mhm.
And Kyra and I had a lot of deep discussion about how to ask this question and how we frame rejection as a writer. And so we want to leave that open-ended for you first and open the floor to discussion.
Interesting. Um, I think that I'm used to being rejected in a lot of different ways, whether it was like door knocking on a source's house as a journalist and waiting outside for a long time, to having, editors always in my job just being like, this sucks. And me being like, okay. So I kind of I think that rejection is just part of writing, and you have to have kind of a thick skin. And I think working in media really helped have a thick skin. When I first started out, it was before everybody would scream at you on Twitter, and I would pick up the phone. I would arrive at the phone every Monday and like have 6 messages from people who hated my articles, even down, yeah. So just kind of, uh, I guess I got used to it. And also just knowing that rejection may not be the end, right? Like it's an opportunity for it to be something else. And the story I like to talk about as it pertains to my book is the actual process of writing it was like 2 years between the proposal and the selling it, the auction process, which was super cool, and like getting it out into the world. But it really was like 10 years and maybe even longer if I think of like my childhood dream of writing a book. But when I initially, this book was a memoir. I was going to write about kind of my crazy childhood, and then that got real dark, and I was like, "You know what? Like, I just don't wanna go there." So I had a job opportunity, and I took the job and kinda, like, shelved it. Then, a couple of years later, a former colleague of mine, another editor, was an agent, and he reached out to me out of the blue, and it was like, "Oh my gosh, an agent just fell into my lap," because that's, like, a hard step to get an agent. Um and so we met, and we were gonna focus on writing about resilience and why is it that some people can overcome incredible hurdles and turn out fine, and other people are really waylaid by them. And I was gonna break each chapter as almost like a case study up and really look at it journalistically. While Angela Duckworth, who's super famous on TED Talk and YouTube, has like hundreds of millions of views, sold her book called Grit, all about resilience, like, as I was putting together my proposal. So that was dead in the water, unfortunately. Um, then, I just like kind of kept my day job, and this other opportunity presented itself. This book from my team and I had, as I'd mentioned earlier, this big success with a super viral campaign. And I had this like idea that no, like there's a larger message here. And at that point, my career had progressed. It was much easier to get an agent, and it just was really seamless. I like found the flow with writing a book. So rejection, rejection, success, and 10 years.
Yeah, offering that perspective is really helpful for like particularly for me, and I imagine for Mackenzie as well, because like there's it's just a matter of like alignment and timing. And to your point, rejection this isn't necessarily the end. And
Right.
sometimes something that I often run into when sort of navigating rejection is sometimes the rejection happens because that opportunity just wasn't meant for you and you're fully qualified, but it just wasn't meant for you. And other times there's like a caliber of improvement that needs to happen for you. So I guess as a quick follow-up question, like how do you determine that, particularly as a writer?
Yeah, where's the line between I actually do need to improve and I shouldn't take this too personally?
Yeah. I think those things can I think, first of all, as writers, we can always improve. Like, I don't know many writers that are just like, "This is my masterpiece." Like, if you write something, you're like, "This is the best thing I've ever written," like, ooh, take a moment. Like, the phrase that nobody likes writing, but everybody likes having written? Like, I feel that in my bones, like, deeply. Um, so I think, believe in yourself, right? Everyone's got their like J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter on a napkin, and then, like I love those like myth stories. But I also think always take feedback and always like look at how you can improve and how you can frame your story. And I think a lot of people have an idea in their head and it morphs a million different ways. And every published writer I know says that. Like I have never met someone that's like, I had this idea and you read it word for word in the book. Like everybody, their idea morphs and changes. It's like a living piece of art.
Beautifully said.
Thanks.
So as questions continue to gather in the chat, this is technically our final like fully prepared question for you.
Yeah.
But we, of course, will probably have some follow-ups. But within the framework, and you've used the language of hustling earlier on in terms of like really putting yourselves in the right rooms and connect with the right people. What are your thoughts about authorpreneurship? Like, in many ways, do authors have to function as their own business and view themselves as such?
Yes. I think authorpreneurship is the perfect way to describe it. Like, that's such a good word because that's what it is. I mean, you cannot just like write a book and like hand it off and be like, all right, call me when it's time to book it on, um, when it's time to promote it. I mean, you even when I was putting together my proposal, part of my proposal was a marketing plan and a PR plan. And even, and I was published by Simon and Schuster, which is a big house. Um, and I was connected to a publicist and she was awesome and deeply experienced and I got along with her well and worked closely with her, but she had a whole slate of book plates. She, obviously was helping and an advocate for me, but I had to really hustle to get to know everyone. And that was I made a list. I carved out time in my book writing process and my deadline process to make sure I was reading on people who were covering topics that included my book, whether it was a podcast or an article in the New York Times or um, anything out, a newsletter, an Instagram influencer, and I reached out. And I didn't just reach out and say, "Hey, can you cover my book?" Because that's so much work. Like I get that all the time. People email me all the time and say, "Can you cover my book?" And I'm like, first of all, who are you? If we're not in the same network. But even people who I knew really well and had long relationships with, I had like an elevator pitch ready to go, like a 3 short paragraph email. "Hey, it's Lindsay. We work together when boom. My book is this, comes out this day. Here are 3 ideas that I think would be a perfect way for you to cover it on LinkedIn slash Amazon slash people slash the Today Show slash whatever." And I individualized every single pitch, for every single place. It took a lot of time, but it was successful, and that extra time paid off because I landed more than 80 press placements for my book, um, amid a global pandemic.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
um, okay, so Mackenzie and I have conversations about this particular follow-up question all the time, and it pertains directly to entrepreneurship. You just said that what you described, particularly in the personalization of all of your pitches and outreaches, which we highly encourage members of our community, but that's a lot of time. That's a lot of effort. It sounds like you got to be really intentional about preventing burnout. Do you have
Yeah.
any like general advice on that?
Yes, and that's like when I use the word hustle, I almost like bite my tongue because I feel like hustle doesn't mean I'm working 24/7. Like I got kids. I can't work 24/7. Like I had paid work at the same time to keep my name out there and publishing because I didn't want to just disappear for 2 years. Like I wanted to make sure I was doing speaking engagements and getting bylines and that I was still considered a thought leader in the parenting space by the time my book came out. Um, so I was extremely intentional and extremely organized. I'm going to check my privilege that I quit my like corporate full-time job to write my book. I got a pretty solid book advance, which was like a really lucky thing, and was able to like keep my health insurance through my partner. So I will like 100% acknowledge some privilege there. But I like got my co-working space and I treated book writing like a real job. I arrived by 8:30 or 9 a.m. every morning. I wrote my 2,000 words and I gave myself like very specific deadlines. Like I need to pitch X number of stories. I need to help put together a strategy for my PR plan. I need to make sure my spreadsheet is in good shape with my contacts. I need to make sure I'm hosting like one person a week for coffee or sending out little emails here and there. Like I really took it seriously. Like I really treated it as a job. And I think as writers, it's like so easy for people to be like, well, you're just like writing in a closet somewhere. It's like, no, like this is real legit work. So I think you have to take it seriously and you have to carve out time for it to the best of your ability. But then that said, 5 o'clock would come around, and not saying that I wouldn't answer emails after my kids went to bed, because that is like the story of the working parent everywhere, whether, and like really the working person everywhere, whether you've got some kind of a commitment or a child waiting for you. Um, but I just like had to try to fit it in the best that I could, and protect myself. And to like talk about Stephen King, for example, so 2,000 words. Well, some days those 2,000 words like flew out of me in like an hour and a half. And so every once in a while I would say, I'm done at 11 a.m. and just take an afternoon off. Um, Not often, because there were plenty of days those 2,000 words were like, oh my God, where I was like writing on my laptop as I was running out the door at 5 p.m. and just like, and I would have to like log back on later at night and get 300 more words to hit my deadline. Um, but I think like also just understanding like sometimes you're going to be in the flow and sometimes you're going to have a bad day, and just like kind and compassionate to yourself as well.
Absolutely.
Completely.
Yeah. And because, there
I
was,
needed to hear that.
it was like never like I was like, "Oh, I'm done. Like I've achieved every press placement." Like, no, like to this day I'm still like, "Huh, I should have done this. I should have done that." So also like I feel like the kindness and the compassion part like is a big one that I just want to emphasize.
Well, we have had multiple questions come through in the chat here. I'm excited to get your answers and opinions. So the first one we've got, question. What are your
Okay.
thoughts or strategies for Kindle Vella? Is that something that you're excited about, that you've had your eye on?
Yeah, look, I am excited anytime that we can bring new voices to the forefront. I think this is so important. We need more representation in who is writing. We need more representation in the gatekeepers, in who is given a platform on which their stories. So I think, really good storytelling, and please like keep them coming, because the more amazing stories that Amazon can help publish, the better, because we need them.
Absolutely. And I definitely think that given the size and nature of Amazon's platform, it could be a very viable place to create that more diverse and far reaching platform that people really desire. So, the next question we have for you is, what advice do you have for authors in terms of marketing their books? Like any
Yeah.
tips?
Well, I think just being really organized is important. I think as writers, like I'm always like spreadsheets, ugh. But I made a lot of spreadsheets. I also did a lot of Google Docs because I liked how they were shareable, which was helpful because I could share them with my publisher. I could share them with my publicist. I could share them. They were just like and like, let's say I was out in the world and I got an email and I was at the playground with my kid. I could be like, oh, hold on, let me like get onto this like document on the cloud. It just gave me a lot more flexibility. So I think be really organized. I think never be afraid to reach out to somebody who you met, like your uncles, cousins, sisters, babysitters, mom, works in publishing. Great. You know what? Like, send her an email. The worst thing that happens is she just never writes back. Who cares? Like, you've lost nothing. The best thing that happens is she writes back and you get a book deal from it. So I feel like it's like put yourself out there as much as possible to like what you have the ability to do. Um, I think also like read up on the industry. Like if you are writing, for me, like writing a parenting book, I was like, who are the editors I know? And granted, I had um, a deep network there because I was an editor in the parenting space and had been a lifestyle editor and a entertainment editor for years before that. Um, but that's not to say that you couldn't get to know bloggers or get to know writers or pitch stories or interact with people on social media. I mean, I think you really want to think of your book as a business and you as a business person when it comes to getting it out there. And build up your social media as much as you can. That has been like again and again such a huge thing that I've seen come up again and again with writers and authors.
Audience building is no joke.
Yeah, it
Exhausting.
truly is not. It's it is quite a feat to initiate and also to maintain.
I hear you.
So the next question we have rolling into the comments is, so on kind of on sort of the other side of the process, but also not really, because I'm sure they're very connected. Do you have
Uh-huh.
any tips for pitching or querying your book, like in like the deal phase?
Yeah. So fiction and nonfiction have very different pitching and querying processes. I recommend if you can swing it to get a subscription to Publishers Weekly, it's like $25 a month. I found it really helpful to just examine the kind of agents that were selling certain kinds of books because there are book deals are listed in like the publishers like a weekly newsletter on it. And from that you can kind of pinpoint agents if you don't have one. And you might say, I have this great book about talking octopi, which I know sounds weird, but that was our number one best of the year so far book on Amazon. It was a talking octopus, remarkably bright creatures. It was delightful. Um, but you may find an interesting thread there. For me, I didn't know my agent before I pitched him, but I leveraged my network. And as a journalist, I realized not everybody is in like that place to like leverage a network to get an agent. Um, so my pitch was 2 pages, super succinct, maybe even 1 page. Like, here's why this will sell. Here's why this book is awesome. Here's my experience. I mean, you are selling yourself. I've sent it around before to friends just to like see it just so that you can like you want to email that out to basically as many people as you know because again your babysitters, sisters, cousins, friends, uncles, whatever, maybe an agent. Send it around, or you may find information from Publishers Weekly. um, from that, that opened up a lot of doors. I was able to get matched up from my query letter to an agency that specializes in working with journalists, which was great. So I think also, again, don't take rejection personally here when you're pitching your books because I had met with a ton of agents over the 10 years and some of them like outright rejected me and were like, you're too young. You don't have this. Like when I was just starting out in my career, you don't have X, Y, and Z, and a lot of times it wasn't me, it was them, right? Like they were like, I just don't do biography, or I just don't do memoir, or I don't do nonfiction, or I only do literary fiction. So that's why I think it's really important to like, because there are only so many hours in the day and you are a human and not a robot, like you need to like do your research to find out the right people to send it to. So you're not just like hustle, 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 but it's not landing.
Totally. And this next question that we got coming up, it's a really thick one, but I think the core
Yeah.
of this question is like what are your opinions about getting reviews on your work?
Yeah. So, um, I'm assuming, are you talking about like an Amazon review, like a customer review, or like a review on the Amazon book review, or both, which I'm happy to talk
Both.
about?
I think it would be
Okay.
great to hear about getting Amazon book reviews specifically.
Yeah. So I put together like a super basic BCC mass email list when I was working on my book. First of all, I launched a newsletter, a free newsletter on MailChimp, which was wonderful because then people were able to sign up for my newsletter and I would just like do a curation of relevant stories that were happening as I was writing my book. And from that, I was able to like port my entire personal network into it, but then people would sign up for it. And then people would unsubscribe and you couldn't take it personally because it's fine. People get a lot of email. Anyways, so I would create like this email listserv and I would keep people updated. So when my book was coming out, I actually emailed it around to my entire network with sample um like with like links to every single place you could leave a review. Amazon. Here's my bookseller page. Here are some sample things. I didn't say like I didn't write the reviews for people, but I was like here's some ideas of things you might like. Like maybe you liked my chapter about screen time and you could write about that. Like I basically your goal is to make it as easy on your friends and your family and your professional network as possible. You send an email, you say, "Here's my book, here's what it's about, here's you can pre-order," because pre-order is also something that's incredibly important. Something everyone should know about pre-orders is that to make the bestseller list, if your book's coming out in October and your bookseller page comes out a year before that, every single pre-order counts in your first week's sales. So that's how you make it onto the bestseller list if you like really ramp up the pre-orders. So you start reaching out to people lightly about pre-ordering your book, posting it on your social networks. You make it easy. You send an email out to your friends. Here's the link to my Amazon bookseller page. Here's the link to all my social media accounts. Here are all my social media handles. If you could tag me, post photos. I even attached photos of my book cover and said, if you want to share it on social, amazing. Look, you can't force people to do it, but it's really helpful to just like give people the tools they need to do it. It's not like gaming the system because no one's going to do it if they don't like your book, if they don't want to. So make it easy. To secure a book review on the Amazon Book Review, now this is really interesting. You really see, like we work really closely with all the publishing houses. So I see the sales team like pitching these books. So a lot of the times, um, it's like I don't want to say it's not out of your hands. Nothing's out of your hands, but I think it's like just being in touch with the writers on it and like but really also pushing your publisher to promote it because your publisher has a really strong voice. Um, and knows the timing. Like right now I'm reading books for August and I'm just about to start books for September. So your publisher can help you with timing there for the Amazon book review.
Thank you so much. I think that pre-order nugget of wisdom is like particularly helpful for us as authors planning out our marketing tactics and just knowing that that's a very important thing to leverage should we want to attain bestseller status. So those are all the questions that we saw sort of trickling inside of the chat. So I guess like our final question for you would be, do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
Yeah, I just think that your story is valid. And I think writing can be like this lonely, solitary pursuit. And I don't get beat down. Like keep at it. It's worth it. You may face some rejection, but put it out there. Create your art and there's an audience for your story and people want to read it.
Thank you so much for your encouragement.
Author hugs all around.
Yes,
What we all just need
virtual
to.
hugs.
Virtual hugs indeed.
And thank you so much again for your time today. It was a pleasure speaking with you and hearing your stories and your advice. I pulled some great nuggets from that one that I'm going to remember and that are going to stick with me.
Thank you so much, Kyra and Mackenzie, and everybody who took the time to join. I can't wait to read all of your books.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. That was great. I enjoyed that thoroughly.
That was so awesome. I learned so much. Well, beautiful people. So thank you so much for joining us for an afternoon with Lindsay Powers. While we usually you're used to seeing our faces over at coffee chats, just know that if you want, we're all on the same channel here over at Manuscript. So if you want to see a particular person speak or you want a particular issue addressed, do not hesitate to suggest the topic in the comments below. And know that you can reach out to us whenever you'd like inside of the broader manuscript ecosystem through our Instagrams, etc. And just know that we're going to continue to have these fruitful conversations with all kinds of interesting people.
Yes. And for those of you in the boot camp, we look forward to seeing your lovely faces again this coming Monday.
Woo! Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.